And then in 2010, Natalie Portman was in Black Swan, which was the film that got her Oscar win and her BAFTA. This is directed by Darren Aronofsky. It tells a story of a committed ballet dancer who struggles to maintain her sanity after winning the lead role in the production of Swan Lake.
Black Swan is one of the best films of the last 20 years, I think. And I believe it's Aronofsky's best film and Natalie Portman's best performance. This is such a great psychological horror thriller that you rarely see anymore. And it's such a powerful, interesting, intriguing, but also terrifying movie about the psychological breakdown of this character.
Yeah, it's, again, her most challenging and her best performance for sure. And the fun thing about this movie is you can interpret it different ways, and Aronofsky kind of leaves an ambiguous ending towards the end of the film. Obviously, you've never seen this film. We will be spoiling it a little bit. And ballet is an incredibly beautiful art form. I have a good friend of mine who's a ballet dancer professionally, but it's also hidden with all sorts of pain and issues. And, you know, she's told me stories about the damage it does to your feet. I've seen a ballet dancer's feet. It's no joke. Damage to your joints, your knees, your body. Female dancers have to maintain like a low body weight for performing to be able to lift it up and everything. And they have to be light and nimble. It requires years and years of dedication and countless hours of practice. And Natalie's entire identity throughout the film is achieving perfection. And you watch the emotional trauma that she goes through just to achieve it.
Ultimately about Natalie Portman's transition into becoming the Black Swan, which is a metaphor for her transitioning from adolescence into adulthood as a woman. Because so Nina has grown up in a very sheltered environment. Her mother has kept her in a small bubble of the dancing community. So Nina has no friends except for her mother. Her room is still dressed out as if it was a kid's room. There's lots of pinks and purples.
She has butterflies, stuffed animals.
Yeah, it looks like a little kid's room. And but she's an adult. So she's lived a very sheltered life. Her mother has kept her sheltered in order to achieve the perfection of becoming the greatest dancer alive. And then as an adult, she has no friends. She's not friends with any of the other ballet dancers. She keeps to herself. But also the way she dresses, lots of pinks, lots of purples. She dresses like most young girls will dress. And then her wardrobe actually changes throughout the film, where she has a lot of pinks and purples. And then she starts wearing more whites and grays and muted tones. And then she starts wearing darker tones like charcoals and blacks. And this alludes to the fact that with pinks and purples, it represents innocence and purity. And then with the whites and neutrals and grays, it represents indifference and detachment, because she's in the middle of the transition of becoming a woman. And then when she finally is a woman, she's wearing a lot of blacks and dark grays, which shows rebellion and maturity as an adult.
Yeah, because like you said, Nina represents like the fragile, innocent white swan, whereas Lily, played by Mila Kunis, represents the dark and seductive black swan, you know, with her dark makeup, clothing, and the black swan wing tattoo on her back.
With Lily's character, she represents Nina's first ever interaction with any kind of sexuality and intimacy, because part of why she is still mentally an adolescent is because she's never had sex. She's never experienced intimacy. And so that's why she, at this moment in her life, can't play the Black Swan, because she doesn't know anything about sex or sexuality. And so Lily's character is her first ever interaction with someone on an intimate level.
Yeah, and what happens in the film is the director of Swan Lake needs a replacement for the lead dancer, and Nina's obviously the first choice because she's so talented. However, there's a new competition with this new dancer, Lily, who comes out of nowhere, played by Mila Kunis, and the two build this odd rivalry and eventually a twisted friendship and competition over getting the part.
And the rivalry stems from Nina is the most talented, but Lily has the sexual energy and confidence in order to portray the Black Swan.
And throughout the film, and throughout trying to be cast as the Black Swan and get the lead role, Natalie Portman goes through all sorts of hallucinations, and she kind of doesn't know what's real anymore, because you can interpret it with it You can interpret it that she's possibly dealing with schizophrenia. She's seeing things that aren't real, but she thinks are completely real. Like the intimate sex scene with Lily, she thinks was 100% real. She thinks it happened, but it really was a hallucination. She's hallucinating, seeing portraits on the walls moving and dancing and laughing at her.
She's seeing her reflection looking back at her and moving in its own way.
And her body is transforming throughout the film. She is developing this rash on her back, which is slowly spreading, and it seems to be where wings are about to sprout. And there's that really disturbing scene where she's picking at that scab and the big rash on her back, and it's almost like the follicles on like a skinless chicken breast are poking out, and she pulls out that little baby follicle feather, and it's just like, what the fuck is going on with this woman? But again, she's hallucinating that she's turning into the Black Swan.
Yeah, what I think she's doing is she's destroying the child that she has been. She's like breaking down the child Nina in order to become the adult Nina.
And as she transforms, the way she handles her relationships transforms too. She rejects her mother, her controlling ways. She strikes up that friendship and intimate relationship with Lily that she thinks happened. And she's going out and partying and dancing, and things start to become intense between her and her instructor, who's played by Vincent Cassel. It's awesome, this movie.
Yeah, it's Thomas Leroy. And Leroy knows that Nina is the most talented dancer he has, but he's trying to set loose the sexuality that he needs Nina to possess in order to properly portray Black Swan, because he knows that she's inexperienced intimately, she's very childlike, and with all the talent she has, it's not enough to get the role. And she needs to become a woman in order to play the Black Swan. And so he tries in many ways to elicit these sexual responses from her. And a really cool aspect of this film is, since this movie is mostly about self-identity, nearly every single shot in this movie has a reflective surface of some kind, whether it's a mirror or some kind of piece of metal with a reflective surface. So you can oftentimes, like 95% of the time, you can see Nina's reflection in some way in a shot.
Which is also interpreted in one of her final hallucinations towards the end of the film, where it's the final performance of Swan Lake. And this is the scene where she confronts Lily in the dressing room, and she attacks Lily. But while she's attacking Lily, Lily turns into Nina as the Black Swan, and she sees herself as Lily. And then she kills herself. She stabs Lily in the stomach with the broken piece of glass. And Nina, who's the Black Swan in front of her, turns back into Lily, and she's seen that she's killed and stabbed Lily.
Yeah. And so Aronofsky and Natalie Portman intentionally placed the blood stain on Nina's dress in her groin region to give the idea that in a metaphorical way, Nina has had her first period and she's finally transitioned into adulthood.
And so then eventually Nina, after she hallucinates killing Lily, she goes onto stage and hallucinates that she has fully transformed into the Black Swan. And while she's performing, she's growing these black feathers throughout her arms. Her arms begin to turn into full wings. And it's actually really beautiful, but also terrifying cinema CGI going on. And she gives a masterful performance. And the film ends with her diving onto the mattress. She's given the greatest performance. She's getting the standing ovation. The crowd's going crazy. And then everyone approaches her and is so happy about it. But then they see, and Vincent Cassel's character sees that she's bleeding from her stomach because she killed herself. She stabbed herself before going on stage as the Black Swan. And for me, it's a metaphor that she had to kill herself to become the Black Swan. She had to die.
She had to kill the child Nina in order to become the Black Swan, yeah, and to become an adult.
And the ending, again, you can interpret it for yourself. If she dies before the movie ends, if she dies later on, or if she survives. But personally, for me, I think that Nina eventually dies.
Yeah, I think she dies in the end. But it's a fascinating movie. I adore it. And it's actually, Black Swan is one of the most successful movies of all time. This movie was made on a tiny, tiny budget of $13 million. And it made $330 million on box office. So it made a profit of over $300 million, which is why it's so successful. I mean, yeah, the Marvel movies are making $1 billion, but those are $300 million productions. This movie made $330 million on a $13 million budget, so it is considered hands down one of the most profitable films ever made in history.
That's probably how Aronofsky was able to do Noah after that.
Yeah.
And Portman went through a lot while filming Black Swan. She broke a rib. She also had a serious injury to her ankle. There was really no medic on set because low budget production didn't really allow for it. She lost 20 pounds for the role, so she's very skinny in the film, training up to 16 hours a day. And again, she'd been practicing ballet since she was 4, and she still kept up with classes here and there, but she also paid for all of her own ballet training in this film.
And we've talked about it before, but the stunt dancer, the main stunt dancer, she took issue with the final product of the film, saying that it was unfair for Natalie Portman to get all this Oscar attention because she didn't do all of the dancing. But Aronofsky and the producers eventually proved that Natalie Portman actually performed 80% of all the dancing untouched, because the rest of the dancing was so intense that only a professional ballerina could do the moves. So they had this stunt dancer perform those routines, and they digitally put Natalie Portman's face on her. But I think it was unfair to try and exclaim that it was a fake dance routine by Portman when in fact she performed 80% of all the dances herself.
And she's the actor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an actress playing the role.
Yeah.